The sea, they said, was for men, a world of brute force and sharp steel. But on the deck of the Revenge, a new power was rising, one of whispers and shadowed glances, wielded by a woman named Anne Bonny. When she boarded, the crew laughed. A woman on a pirate ship? A captain's folly. They saw weakness. Anne offered them a slow, dangerous smile. She wouldn't fight her way to the top. She would seduce her way there. Each night, the captain's quarters became her domain. Calico Jack, a man of flamboyant legend, was ensnared. By morning, Anne was no longer a passenger, but the captain's confidant. She needed no title. Influence was her scepter, access her crown. In the world of pirates, that was absolute power. But Anne wasn't the only woman walking a dangerous line. Mary Read, disguised as a man, had earned her place with a fierce spirit and a sharp blade. The crew saw a brother-in-arms, but in the quiet hours, Anne and Mary found a shared understanding. In the flickering lantern light, their bond was forged, a silent mutiny against the world of men. The crew, blinded by their assumptions, saw only the captain's fiery mistress and a quick-tempered deckhand. They never suspected the true power on the Revenge lay in the clandestine meetings of these two women. A quiet cabin boy, with a face as smooth as a polished shell, became their unwitting pawn. He moved like a ghost, his youth a perfect camouflage. The officers confided in him, their words delivered to Anne like freshly caught fish. By the time they recognized the silken trap, it was too late. Their allegiances had been subtly shifted, their loyalties expertly manipulated. The crew of the Revenge believed they sailed under Calico Jack's command, but every course charted, every chest of gold hauled aboard, was a move in a game they didn't know they were playing. It was Anne's game, with Mary as her queen. While the men sharpened their steel, Anne and Mary wielded a different arsenal, a well-placed touch, a secret shared. The ocean, they had been told, belonged to men. But as the Revenge cut through the inky waters, it was two women who held the helm, their reign built not on the strength of their swords, but on the unyielding power of their secrets.
The waves that rocked the Revenge told a story older than any pirate legend. They whispered that while the crew of the Revenge unknowingly followed the will of two women, their ship was not unique. Every vessel on the high seas had its own shadows, its own secrets slipping through the cracks like candle smoke. Even when the sea was calm, something was always moving in the dark. Every pirate ship had a captain, but behind every great captain was a body they trusted too much. Power on the water wasn't just taken with knives, it was earned with skin. The sharpest captains knew a single kiss could stop a mutiny before it started. Some lovers were chosen for pleasure, but the most valuable were picked for strategy. One feared captain, they said, ruled the Caribbean because of a secret. His most trusted informant wasn't his first mate, but the man who shared his bed. Every night that lover whispered names and plots into his ear. By morning, traitors were food for the sharks, and no one understood how the captain always stayed 3 steps ahead. The crew only whispered about the quiet moans from the captain's quarters, and how someone always left before sunrise, fully dressed but marked by the night. This currency of desire wasn't limited to the captain. Below deck, pirates offered more than gold for what they wanted. A night of passion could earn a promotion, a whispered promise in the dark, another day of life. But lust rarely stays quiet. On one windless night, 2 men, both lovers to the same officer, discovered their shared secret. The jealousy was a storm, the fight swift and bloody. By dawn, one was dead, The other vanished into the sea. Their officer never smiled again, a stark reminder that the price of desire could be everything. Still, the sails rose and the anchor lifted. The ship moved on, as if nothing had happened, carrying its ghosts. The sea had more stories to tell, of hidden love and desires too dangerous for daylight, where secrets touched skin and men touched each other in the deep, silent dark.
On the sea, there were no kings, no churches, only the wind, the waves, and a raw, unspoken want. The dark below deck held stories no one dared to speak, not from shame, but because survival demanded silence. Here, 100 men, with hands rough from rope and eyes that had seen too much, lived side by side. Some nights, in the suffocating quiet, those eyes didn't look away. The loneliness was often louder than the cannons. It began as an accidental touch, held the moment too long. It grew into a shared look, a whispered word, a desperate need. On ships devoid of women, this hunger found its own harbor. Two young men, both angry at the world, might find each other in the space between shifts. They wouldn't speak of love, but under the sway of the hammocks, skin against skin, they found a brief escape. The crew noticed, of course, but a silent pact was kept. That bond made them stronger, fiercely loyal. They watched each other's backs in a fight, a loyalty some called a sea marriage. Secret ceremonies were sometimes held, a whispered vow under the moon, a strip of cloth binding two wrists together. It was a promise of something real in a world of blood and betrayal. But such bonds were as perilous as they were potent. One captain, intolerant of what he deemed softness, threw a sailor overboard for kissing his bunkmate. The other jumped in after him, and the sea took them both. Yet there were other tales. A different captain, facing a mutiny, spared his lover and lost his ship. He risked everything for the one hand he could trust in the dark, and never regretted it. Even so, the softest hands could still carry blades, and the fiercest loyalty could be tested. As the ship finally reached port, a new danger waited. It wasn't the threat of a rival's cannon, but a desire wrapped in silk, with painted lips and eyes that saw far too much. The pleasures of land could be bought, but they always came at a cost, especially when pirates left the sea and entered the intoxicating world of the brothels. The moment the anchor dropped, the world shifted. The scent of salt gave way to perfume, sweat to silk, and the cold reality of steel to the false warmth of soft skin. In the candle-lit corners of Tortuga and Nassau, pirates were no longer warriors. They were simply men, stumbling, drunk on rum and a desperate hunger for more than gold. They poured into brothels dripping with music and moans, where every smile had a price and every kiss was a potential blade. These places were not havens, they were beautiful, deadly traps. The madams who ran them were not fools. They knew that pirates carried more than coins. They carried secrets. Maps, shipping routes, and whispers of weakness were a currency far more valuable than treasure. Their courtesans were trained in more than just pleasure. They were experts at pulling truth from a man's gasps, at unraveling plots between moans. A madam known as Red Labuni was feared more than most captains. It was said she once seduced a fleet leader, stole his codes, and sold him to his rivals in a single night. Of course, some pirates played the game themselves, using the chaos of a brothel to their advantage. Deals were struck between bodies, messages slipped into waiting hands, and strategies planned amidst the distraction of an orgy, the maps on the floor ignored by all. But pleasure always carried risk. Jealousy burned hotter than rum, and blood often spilled on velvet sheets.
A pirate might kill his own quartermaster for choosing the same courtesan, and the madam would simply raise her prices. Here, power came not from cannons, but from charm. But the games of the flesh did not remain in port. Lust, like a fever, followed the men back to their ships. The fleeting intimacy bought on land could curdle into obsession at sea, a dangerous poison that could tear a loyal crew apart from the inside out, proving that a pirate's greatest downfall often began not with a broadside, but with a whisper in a stranger's bed.
Lust, carried back from port like a fever, never stayed sweet for long. What began as a desperate whisper in a brothel often ended with a scream on the sun-bleached deck. Pirates didn't just fall in love. They fell for lies. They fell into traps. They fell hard. The sea, in its cold indifference, was always waiting to claim the wreckage. There was a captain, a man who ruled with fire and fear, who gave his heart to a courtesan in Havana. He trusted her more than his own first mate. When she begged him to spare a certain merchant ship, whispering that the voyage was too great a risk, he listened. He turned his vessel around, choosing her lips over loot. That very night, a rival crew took the prize, claiming gold worth a kingdom. His men did not forgive him. The mutiny was swift, and the captain was thrown to the waves he had once commanded. Another tale speaks of a fierce woman pirate who kept two lovers, one on land and one at sea, both believing they were her only one. The illusion shattered the day they finally met on the docks. Rage was the only language they spoke. She tried to intervene, but the fight was brutal, and only one man walked away. He never spoke her name again, leaving her with a silence more damning than any curse. Captains lost battles not to enemy cannons, but to their own jealousy. One leader, enraged at seeing his lover share a laugh with another sailor, delayed a crucial raid to chain the man in the brig. By the time his fury cooled, the target was gone, the gold claimed by a crew that valued treasure over passion. Lust made them reckless, blind, and foolish. In the end, it was never the storms or the navies that brought the great pirate lords to their knees. It was the secrets they whispered into the wrong ears, the hearts they misplaced in dangerous hands. The sea only answers to power, and when passion gets tangled in the lines, it always ends in pain. The deadliest weapon on the high seas was never the cutlass. It was, and always would be, desire.